And Frank Klose now joins us, as he does each and every Tuesday here on the Sports Bash on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Frank, a little bit early this year, but we're still pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it's really weird that it's March, that we're going to have opening day, and it just doesn't seem right. I keep thinking that I need to wait till April, but even that's sneaking up on us, so there any moment.
Now, do you know if what was the reasoning for baseball to start opening day so early this year? Do you know, or is it just it is what it is?
I do. Well, a couple of years ago, the Players Union wanted some extra days off on the schedule, both in spring training and during the season. So in order to accommodate that and make sure the World Series isn't in January, even though it's already almost it's in November anymore, they had to start a little bit earlier. So the early start date gives them a few more days off during the season. Because let's face it, it is a grind. So especially now that they don't take any special vitamins to help get them through a season, they need these days off. So they're starting a little bit earlier for that reason.
How, really quick, Frank, how does baseball balance this idea that, well, the players need more days off versus the fact that attendance in many cities is actually down? How do you reconcile, maybe the issue isn't needing more days off, maybe the issue is we have too many games in general?
Yeah, one thing that's kind of been kicked around before is, going back to a 154-game season. It doesn't seem like teams are willing to give up that revenue just yet. I would not be surprised if someday they do scale it back to I think they would go back to 154 instead of 162, because that's a number where there's a precedent. But it's going to be hard for teams to want to give up that revenue. And, the teams that sell out every night, certainly that's a big deal. If you subtract even if it's a smaller number of home games, would be essentially 4 home games. That's a pretty big ticket if they give that up. So for now, I think that they're going to try to make 162 as long as they possibly can. But I wouldn't be shocked if eventually they scale it back a little bit.
Yeah, baseball used to be a 154 game schedule. I'm not saying that 8 games is not important, but Frank, I would say that I understand the value of having all these games because there's basically a daily opportunity for revenue. But I think that what we're seeing, Frank, overall in the sports world is that these seasons are so long, whether it's baseball, basketball, or hockey. You're talking about 8-9 months out of the year. These sports are involved in the conversation, and people are almost take for granted the fact that the games are there. Whereas football, at least, less is more. There's a sense of urgency that the other sports don't give you as much.
Yeah, there's certainly not the build up. I mean, if baseball were like football, and your team has your one starting pitcher, and you're gearing up for that one game each week, I'm sure it would go much differently. But ever since the inception, baseball's been a sport where they play pretty much every day, and I think that would be a kind of a hard thing to break. But I could see a smaller 154-game schedule again, but I don't think anybody's ready to give it up on a daily basis just yet.
Michael wants to know, let's get into the mailbag now, Frank. Michael wants to know, is Hoskins a 45 home run guy with Harper ahead of him and Real Muto behind him?
Yeah, this is a definite change for Rhys Hoskins. Now, the last couple of years, really since he's come up, he's had to be the guy. And if you look at his numbers, and, I recommend you check out Philly.com today because Ed Barkowitz kind of broke down some of the levels to which Rhys Hoskins has been performing in a short time in the major league. You got to wonder how he'll do when he actually has some lineup protection. The Phillies had added, of course, Harper. Harper's probably going to bat third. Hoskins will bat fourth. So right away, just having that, you're going to see that teams aren't going to want to pitch to Bryce Harper. So what they'll do instead, they'll walk Bryce Harper a lot. Well, what happens when Bryce Harper walks? Well, then Rhys Hoskins comes up behind him. And at that point, if you already have Bryce Harper sitting on first base, if you're the pitcher, you might be thinking, well, I can't let Hoskins get on easily too. And then you start seeing more pitches to hit. I think the first game that they played together in the same lineup, you saw that for the first time. Remember that spring training game? Harper comes up for the first time, walks. Hoskins right behind him, hits a towering home run over the tiki bar in left field. And, that's really the direct result of having somebody like Harper in front of him. And you know what? They can't be too kind either to Hoskins, because behind him is JT Realmuto. So I would expect that Rhys Hoskins is going to see a lot more to hit. Am I willing to go 45 home runs, like I think the question was? That might be tough to predict right off the bat, but you know what? He's going to see a lot more pitches. If he's healthy all year, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, considering that would be an 11 home run improvement over last year. But it's all about seeing pitches to hit. He's definitely going to get more, and then we'll see how this kind of plays out. So definitely he's going to have a lot more to work with this year, as opposed to last year, where the pitcher could come in and say, all right, well, I get Hoskins out. Well, then there's nobody else that's going to try to hurt me. So definite opportunities here for Hoskins to improve big time on his numbers.
Yeah, Frank, I've been working on an article for 97.3 ESPN.com myself. I just haven't had a chance to finish publishing it yet. And look, I think Hoskins is overlooked because you bring in all these all-stars, Realmuto and Harper and Segura and McCutchen, all these guys. But yet what people don't realize is that through his first, if you compare Hoskins' first 203 games versus other young stars like Aaron Judge, Chris Bryant, Bellinger, through their first 203 games, Hoskins has more RBI than Judge. He has more home runs than Bryant and Bellinger. And his numbers of on base and slugging is very comparable to those other three. So I think people overlook the fact that Hoskins himself is a rising star in this game, and that, Harper's going to get all the headlines, but when people go to the ballpark this year, they may see Hoskins hit just as many home runs as Harper this year.
Yeah, I think actually, I'll predict right now, I think Rhys Hoskins is going to hit more than Harper, because I think the way that, they both see a lot of pitches, which is fantastic. So I think that Rhys Hoskins is going to really wait out these at-bats, and he'll wait for the pitch he wants to hit. I think that's what he does. That's his special skill, is that he won't swing at something that he doesn't want to, that he doesn't think is his pitch, and especially with a runner on base ahead of him like Harper, I could easily see Hoskins hitting more home runs than Harper.
All right, back to the mailbag now, Frank. Evan wants to know if you can see Kingery taking over for Franco or Hernandez, and if that does happen, do they get moved for an arm?
So two parts to this question. So I want to talk about the move for an arm question first. Now, someone like Cesar Hernandez, I think he's going to be with the Phillies all year, and the reason for that is, the Phillies, I think, would, in an ideal world, would have traded him to move that salary, which is only about $7 million, and really to kind of open up second base for Scott Kingery. I think that Scott Kingery will have the second base job next year. But the reason why you probably can't move somebody like Hernandez for an arm is that the type of team that's going to be willing to trade the arm is not going to be the type of team that's going to want Hernandez back, who's just going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So in order to really trade him, you're going to have to find the perfect scenario where maybe another contending team wants Hernandez, and then you can get something back that you can use for something else, and that kind of makes out to be pretty complicated for the Phillies to do. So what I see happening is the Hernandez sticks with the club all year, and I think after this year we're going to see Scott Kingery take over at the second base position. But for this year, I'm going to kind of make a mini possible prediction. I would not be shocked if Scott Kingery is the starting third baseman on opening day. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to say that he is going to be the third baseman of the Phillies. But, we saw the inconsistency out of Franco, even in the spring, that we saw last year. And, Franco, he starts out with 6 RBIs by, the second game of spring training, and then he just sort of falls apart and just goes away. And then we don't see another RBI until Saturday. So I think that the Phillies still think that Franco is maddeningly inconsistent, and I think they might actually try to send him a message by maybe starting Kingery on opening day, even if their intention is to play Maikel Franco a lot more than Scott Kingery. And one telling sign for me was it was very clear, and I think I've mentioned this before on the air with you guys, that at some point somebody's got to take up a first baseman's mitt so that they could be a backup to Rhys Hoskins, because they didn't really have a first base backup other than maybe Andrew Knapp, but you need him to be the backup catcher. Well, it was Maikel Franco grabbing that first baseman's mitt in the last week when when Rhys Hoskins was dealing with a little bit of a shoulder issue, not Scott Kingery. So I wouldn't be shocked if Scott Kingery gets that job opening day. Now, in terms of trading Franco, I can see him being the type of player that if you are making a trade for an arm, a team that's rebuilding might want to take him on just to kind of see what they could do with him and see where he'll go. Maybe not thinking that he's a slam dunk for that team, but that's the type of player that a team who's rebuilding might take back in a trade. So I think Hernandez is around. I can see Kingery start opening day. I can see Kingery continue to take playing time away from Maikel Franco at third base while they look for a long-term third base solution. But I also do believe that Franco is kind of on thin ice.
All right, Viral wants to know, do you think the Phillies will pick up a starting pitcher in the next couple of weeks, or do the Phillies front office like the rotation they have going into the season?
I think the one exception is going to be if somebody like Dallas Keuchel falls on their lap. Now, there was another question specifically about Keuchel, and this kind of answers it too. Dallas Keuchel is still unsigned. If he comes to the Phillies and Scott Boras with a good relationship with the Phillies who represents Dallas Keuchel, if he just says, hey, look, could you guys throw him $8 million? If you throw him $8 million, could he be on your team for this year because he doesn't have anything going on? I can see the Phillies saying, okay, sure, $8 million, why not? But I don't really think the Phillies feel like they need to go above and beyond to get another starter. I think they're very happy with what they have, really because they all see potential in all three guys behind Arrieta and Nola. And I think that it's fair to say that JT Realmuto, who also has spoken very highly of all three of them, gets the opportunity to work with those guys going forward. So in terms of an immediate look for help, I don't think the Phillies will do that. I think they're going to try it with the guys they have, again, unless some surprise. Keuchel shows up at their door for a low cost. They might as well roll with those guys. And the Phillies actually have a tremendous amount of depth at AAA this year. When you think of the starting rotation at AAA, you have Cole Irvin, who got another start for the Phillies over the weekend, even though he had already been sent to minor league camp. You have Jared Eichhoff, who could get himself back together. I mean, he's kind of down there at AAA to show that he's healthy. Angel De Los Santos made starts for the Phillies last year. Ranger Suarez made starts for the Phillies last year. So, you kind of keep going down that AAA rotation. That AAA rotation is going to be pretty good because they're going to be loaded with five starters that could potentially help this team this year. So I think the Phillies can essentially say, the starters we have at AAA, they can be a stopgap if one of these guys falters in an immediate future. And then beyond that, you can maybe look to make a trade at the trade deadline. So I really don't think there's a lot of pressure for the Phillies to do something right now in terms of the starting rotation, but they may revisit that a little bit later as time goes on.
Phillies Mailbag every Tuesday at 3:30 here on the Sports Bash, and follow Frank Klose on Twitter at Frank Klose for all your Phillies coverage. As opening day is just a couple days away. Frank, good. Glad to talk with you today about the Phillies, and we're looking forward to opening day on Thursday.
Same here, and I look forward to chatting baseball with you all season long.